Audacity has a specific look, and it usually involves wearing a stolen heirloom sapphire to the very courtroom where the woman you stole it from is finalizing her divorce. What this mistress did not know was that the judge was about to call a name that would destroy her entirely. Room 400 of the Cook County Family Court smelled of stale floor wax and broken promises. It was a sterile, unforgiving environment where decades of shared lives were dissected and distributed like corporate assets. Lillian Ashcroft sat rigidly at the plaintiff's table, her perfectly manicured hands folded over a leather-bound notebook. At 42, she possessed an icy elegance that had been forged in the fires of a spectacularly deceitful marriage. 3 tables away sat her soon-to-be ex-husband, Dominic Ashcroft. He was a prominent Chicago real estate developer who wore his custom Italian suits like armor. Throughout their long marriage, Lillian had been his anchor, the silent partner who hosted the galas and managed the optics while he built his empire. Now they were locked in a vicious legal battle over hidden assets, offshore accounts, and the full timeline of his infidelity. But the most painful dispute was not about the money. It was about the burglary. While Lillian was visiting her ailing mother in Boston, their sprawling Highland Park estate had been broken into. The thieves were surprisingly surgical. They ignored the electronics, bypassed Dominic's collection of vintage watches, and went straight for the master bedroom's floor safe. They cleared out Lillian's personal jewelry collection, a devastating loss capped by the theft of her great-grandmother's necklace. It was not just any necklace, it was an Art Deco masterpiece featuring a massive 20-carat unheated Ceylon sapphire encircled by old mine-cut diamonds, set in a distinctive platinum vine motif. It was the only tangible piece of history Lillian had left from her father's side of the family. The police had hit a dead end, citing a lack of forced entry and suggesting the alarm had been conveniently deactivated. Dominic had gaslighted her for weeks, insisting she must have forgotten to arm the system in her rush to get to the airport. The insurance company had subsequently paid out a massive claim. The funds had been mysteriously routed into an account Lillian could not access. "Breathe, Lillian," whispered her attorney, Isabel Crowe. Isabel was a legal shark in a tailored Chanel suit, known throughout the circuit for her surgical cross-examinations and zero-tolerance policy for courtroom theatrics. "Today is about establishing the timeline of his perjury. Stay focused." "I am focused," Lillian replied, her voice dangerously quiet. "I just want this over." The heavy wooden double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. Lillian did not turn around immediately, but the sudden shift in Dominic's posture, a straightening of the spine, a smug tightening of the jaw, told her everything she needed to know. The gallery benches creaked. It was Vivian Shaw. Vivian was 28, a former junior interior designer who had been hired to stage Dominic's luxury condo developments. She was the cliché Lillian never thought her husband would fall for. Young, ruthlessly ambitious, and dripping with an unearned sense of entitlement. Lillian forced herself to look back. Vivian was sliding into the front row of the gallery directly behind Dominic's defense table. She was dressed for a funeral, yet she was clearly thrilled to be attending. A high-necked, form-fitting black midi dress paired with Christian Louboutin pumps. Her blonde hair was swept into a sleek chignon. And there, resting perfectly against the black fabric at her collarbone, was a heavy, brilliant spark of blue. Lillian's breath hitched in her throat. The world tilted on its axis. The fluorescent lights of the courtroom suddenly felt blinding. It was the sapphire. The platinum vine setting caught the dull light of the room, flashing with undeniable recognition. It was not a replica. It was not a similar piece. It was her great-grandmother's necklace, the necklace that had supposedly been fenced by anonymous burglars months earlier. A wave of nausea washed over Lillian, followed instantly by a surge of white-hot, blinding rage. Her hands began to shake. She grabbed Isabel's forearm, her nails digging into the attorney's expensive wool sleeve. "Look," Lillian choked out, unable to tear her eyes away from the blue stone resting on the mistress's chest. "Isabel, look at her neck." Isabel calmly adjusted her glasses and cast a sideways glance toward the gallery. She studied Vivian for 3 long seconds. The attorney's expression did not change, but her eyes narrowed into tiny, dangerous slits. "Is that it?" Isabel asked, her voice a low, steady hum. "That is my family's sapphire," Lillian hissed, her voice trembling. "He did not just cheat on me, Isabel, he staged the break-in. He stole my family's legacy and gave it to her, and she has the absolute audacity to wear it to my divorce hearing." Lillian moved to stand, ready to lunge across the aisle and rip the platinum chain from Vivian's throat, but Isabel's hand slammed down on her wrist, pinning it to the table with surprising strength. "Do not move," Isabel ordered, her tone brooking no argument. "Do not say a word. Do not even look at her. She is wearing stolen property." "I know," Isabel continued, a slow, terrifying smile spreading across her face. It was the smile of a predator that had just watched its prey walk willingly into a steel trap. "Let her wear it. In fact, let us make sure the judge gets a fantastic look at it." Trust me, Lillian, she just handed us the entire case on a silver platter. Lillian swallowed hard, forcing her heart rate down. She turned her eyes forward, staring at the empty judge's bench. Behind her, she could hear Vivian shifting in her seat, undoubtedly enjoying the attention and mistaking Lillian's rigid posture for defeat. Vivian thought she had won. She thought the necklace was the ultimate power play, a silent declaration that she was the new queen of Dominic's empire. She had no idea she was wearing a heavy, diamond-encrusted anchor around her neck. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed, his voice echoing off the wood-paneled walls. "Court is now in session, the Honorable Harlan Whitmore presiding." Judge Whitmore swept into the room, his black robes billowing slightly. He was a no-nonsense jurist with a reputation for mercilessly punishing those who lied in his courtroom. He took his seat, adjusted his microphone, and peered over his reading glasses at the two legal teams. "Be seated," Judge Whitmore grumbled. "We are here for the continuation of Ashcroft v. Ashcroft. Mr. Hale, you have the floor for the direct examination of your client." Gregory Hale, Dominic's attorney, stood up. He was a sleek, fast-talking lawyer who specialized in protecting the assets of wealthy men. "Thank you, Your Honor. The defense calls Dominic Ashcroft to the stand." Dominic stood, buttoning his suit jacket with a practiced, confident flair. He walked to the witness stand, placed his hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the whole truth. He shot a quick, reassuring glance at Vivian in the gallery before taking his seat. Vivian offered him a soft, encouraging smile, her hand lightly brushing the sapphire pendant at her throat. As the examination continued, Hale led Dominic through a carefully rehearsed narrative. Dominic painted himself as a hard-working victim of a deteriorating marriage. He claimed Lillian was financially reckless, prone to volatile outbursts, and entirely disconnected from reality. "And regarding the stolen jewelry, Mr. Ashcroft?" Hale asked, leaning against the podium. "Your wife has heavily implied that you were somehow responsible for the loss of her assets." Dominic let out a heavy, theatrical sigh. "It breaks my heart, it really does. Lillian was devastated by the burglary, but she has always been careless with security. She routinely left the alarm off. The police report confirms there was no forced entry. I suffered a massive loss as well, but she refuses to accept that it was simply a random tragedy." "And the insurance payout?" Hale prompted. $250,000, Dominic lied smoothly, "which I immediately put into our joint escrow account to cover the damages and replace what was lost. I have tried to be nothing but fair." "Thank you, Mr. Ashcroft. No further questions," Hale said, taking his seat with a triumphant smirk. Judge Whitmore turned his gaze to the plaintiff's table. "Ms. Crow, your witness." Isabel Crow stood up slowly. She did not carry a notepad to the podium. She did not need one. She walked to the center of the floor, the click of her heels the only sound in the room. She stared at Dominic in silence for a long, uncomfortable moment until he shifted nervously in his chair. "Mr. Ashcroft," Isabel began, her voice pleasant and conversational, "let us talk about your timeline with Ms. Vivian Shaw. You testified in your deposition that your romantic relationship began after your separation from my client. Is that correct?" "That is correct," Dominic said, keeping his chin high. "So, around the time of the burglary at the Highland Park estate, Ms. Shaw was nothing more than an employee?" "Yes, a contracted designer," Dominic affirmed. "You had no personal relationship with her?" "No." Isabel nodded slowly, pacing a few steps to her left, deliberately moving closer to the gallery where Vivian sat. "Mr. Ashcroft, under oath, have you ever purchased or gifted high-value jewelry to Ms. Shaw during the course of your marriage to my client?" Dominic hesitated for a fraction of a second. He glanced at Hale, who gave a nearly imperceptible nod. "I bought her a pair of pearl earrings for her birthday recently. Nothing extravagant." "No diamonds?" Isabel asked, raising an eyebrow. "No." "Custom platinum pieces? No rare Ceylon sapphires?" Dominic's face tightened. A flicker of panic flashed in his eyes, but he quickly masked it with indignation. "No, absolutely not." "I see." Isabel turned her back on him and faced the judge. "Your Honor, regarding the insurance claim for the Highland Park burglary. Mr. Ashcroft just testified that the $250,000 payout was placed in a joint escrow account." "He did," Judge Whitmore agreed, looking at his notes. "We have subpoenaed the records for all joint and personal accounts tied to Mr. Ashcroft," Isabel stated, her voice hardening. "I am submitting into evidence Exhibit C, the financial routing history from Liberty Mutual. The funds were not deposited into escrow. They were routed into an offshore shell LLC titled BF Designs, a corporate entity registered in Delaware." Hale jumped to his feet. "Objection! Relevance!" "Overruled!" Judge Whitmore barked, glaring at Dominic. "Where is the money, Mr. Ashcroft?" Dominic opened his mouth, stammered, and closed it. He looked at Hale, desperate for a lifeline. But Isabel was not done. She was not even close to done. She stepped away from the podium and looked directly at Vivian Shaw in the gallery. Vivian's smug smile had faltered slightly, but she still sat with her chin stubbornly raised, the stolen sapphire practically glowing against her black dress. "Your Honor," Isabel said smoothly, turning back to the bench. I am done questioning Mr. Ashcroft for now. However, to clear up this timeline and the location of the supposedly stolen assets, the plaintiff calls our first witness to the stand. Judge Whitmore leaned back. Call your witness, Ms. Crow. Isabel looked dead center at the courtroom doors. Her voice rang out, clear and sharp as a guillotine blade. The plaintiff calls Damien Cole to the stand. In the gallery, Vivienne Shaw physically jolted. The color instantly drained from her perfectly bronzed face, leaving her a sickly ash white. Her hand flew up, violently clutching the sapphire at her throat as if she had suddenly been burned by it. Her eyes went wide with pure, unadulterated terror. Dominic turned around to look at his mistress, confused by her sudden, silent panic. Vivienne? He mouthed. Vivienne could not look at him. She was staring at the heavy wooden double doors at the back of the courtroom, her breathing shallow and ragged. Damien Cole. To Dominic Ashcroft, the name meant nothing. But to Vivienne Shaw, Damien Cole was the wealthy, charming Seattle tech investor she had been having a secret, passionate affair with. He was the man she had been sleeping with behind Dominic's back. He was the man she had drunkenly bragged to about her sugar daddy's brilliant scheme to rob his own house. And most importantly, Damien Cole was the man to whom Vivienne had given a velvet bag full of Lillian's other stolen jewelry only days earlier, begging him to use his connections to quietly fence the diamonds in Europe so she could have a cash safety net when she eventually left Dominic. The heavy doors groaned open. A tall man in a sharp gray suit stepped into the courtroom. He had piercing eyes and carried a thick manila folder. He did not look at Vivienne as he walked down the aisle. He did not offer her the warm, romantic smile he had given her in bed only nights before. His face was a mask of professional, icy detachment. Because Damien Cole was not a tech investor. He was a high-tier independent insurance fraud investigator and private detective hired by Isabel Crow months earlier to shadow Vivienne Shaw. Vivienne's entire reality shattered in real time. She tried to stand up, her knees buckling beneath her. She sank back onto the wooden bench, trapped, wearing the primary piece of physical evidence around her neck as the man who had her complete recorded confession took the oath. Damien Cole did not so much as glance at the gallery as he strode past the wooden bar and took his place in the witness stand. He raised his right hand, swearing to tell the truth with a voice as flat and unyielding as polished concrete. Please state your name and occupation for the record, Isabel Crow instructed, stepping up to the podium. Damien Cole. I am a licensed private investigator and the lead fraud specialist at Apex Subrogation and Recovery in Chicago, Illinois. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. At the defense table, Dominic Ashcroft turned perfectly pale. His eyes darted from Damien to Isabel and finally to his attorney, Gregory Hale, who was suddenly furiously shuffling through his case files, realizing he had just been completely blindsided. But the most visceral reaction came from the front row. Vivienne Shaw let out a sound that was half sob, half hiccup. Damien, she whispered, the word carrying through the stunned silence of the courtroom. What are you doing? Judge Whitmore slammed his gavel. Order, one more outburst from the gallery and I will clear this room. He pointed a stern finger at Vivienne. Keep quiet, young lady. Isabel waited for the echo of the gavel to fade before continuing. Mr. Cole, were you retained by my firm some time ago? I was, Damien confirmed, adjusting the microphone. You hired my agency to investigate the suspicious circumstances surrounding a burglary at the Ashcroft residence, specifically regarding the disappearance of high-value jewelry and a subsequent $250,000 insurance payout. And how did you proceed with this investigation? Given the lack of forced entry and the deactivated alarm, our primary suspect was the defendant, Dominic Ashcroft, Damien explained, his eyes fixed on Isabel. However, Mr. Ashcroft is heavily insulated by corporate lawyers. I opted for a different angle. I initiated surveillance on his known associate and mistress, Vivienne Shaw. Objection! Hale shouted, leaping up. Inflammatory language. Overruled, Judge Whitmore snapped, his eyes glued to the witness. The plaintiff has already established a timeline of infidelity that your client just perjured himself over. Sit down, Mr. Hale. Proceed, Mr. Cole. Damien opened the thick manila folder in his lap. Through surveillance, I established that Ms. Shaw was living well above her means. She had recently moved into a luxury apartment in the Gold Coast neighborhood, the lease of which was paid by BF Designs, the same Delaware LLC that received the Liberty Mutual Insurance payout. Dominic buried his face in his hands. It was over. The financial link was undeniable. But Isabel was not just here for the money. She was here for the absolute annihilation of the man who had tried to steal her client's sanity. Did your investigation of Miss Shaw remain strictly observational, Mr. Cole? Isabel asked, leaning forward. No, ma'am. Later in the investigation, I initiated direct contact. I adopted an alias, a wealthy tech investor from Seattle, and frequented a cocktail lounge Miss Shaw was known to visit. We struck up a conversation, which quickly evolved into a romantic relationship. In the gallery, Vivienne covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face and ruining her perfect makeup. The man she had been secretly sleeping with, the man she had planned to run away with once she had squeezed Dominic dry, was a phantom. A weapon forged by the wife she had mocked. During the course of this relationship, Isabel said, savoring the word, did Ms. Shaw ever discuss the plaintiff's stolen jewelry? Frequently, Damien said. Ms. Shaw was highly motivated by financial security. She boasted about her current partner's wealth, eventually revealing that Mr. Ashcroft had staged the robbery to hide assets from his wife before initiating the divorce. She claimed Mr. Ashcroft had given her the crown jewel of the heist as a promise ring of sorts. Your Honor, I have a signed affidavit and a thumb drive containing legally obtained one-party consent audio recordings of these conversations, Isabel said, handing a folder to the bailiff to pass to the judge. In one recording, Ms. Shaw explicitly refers to the necklace as Lillian's dead grandmother's ugly blue rock, refitted for a younger neck. Lillian sat frozen at the plaintiff's table, her heart pounding against her ribs. She did not feel a triumph yet, only a cold, terrifying awe at Isabel's utter ruthlessness. Mr. Cole, Isabel continued, her voice dropping an octave, did Ms. Shaw only possess the sapphire necklace? No, Damien replied. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a heavy black velvet drawstring bag. He placed it on the wooden ledge of the witness stand. It landed with a heavy metallic clink. Only days ago, Ms. Shaw brought this to my hotel room. She believed I had connections in the European black market. She asked me to fence these items for cash, stating she needed a secret exit fund because she was growing tired of Mr. Ashcroft's controlling behavior. Dominic's head snapped up. His eyes widened in horror. He spun around in his chair, staring at Vivian. You were trying to steal from me? Dominic hissed, his voice echoing in the dead silent room. You were sleeping with him and trying to fence my money? Dominic, I didn't, Vivian wailed, her carefully constructed facade crumbling into absolute hysteria. He tricked me. He lied to me. You ungrateful little... Dominic lunged out of his chair toward the gallery. Bailiff, Judge Whitmore roared. The armed court officer intercepted Dominic instantly, shoving the wealthy developer hard against the heavy oak table. Stay down, the bailiff commanded, his hand resting menacingly on his service weapon. Order! Judge Whitmore struck his gavel repeatedly, his face flushed with fury. Mr. Ashcroft, if you move a single muscle, I will have you shackled and dragged down to the holding cells. Ms. Shaw, shut your mouth immediately. The courtroom fell into a heavy, panting silence. Dominic remained pinned against the table, his chest heaving, staring at the velvet bag on the witness stand. The sheer magnitude of the betrayal, that his young, beautiful mistress was actively robbing him while sleeping with a man she thought was richer, broke him completely. He slumped back into his chair, a defeated, pathetic shell of the arrogant man who had walked in that morning. Your Honor, Isabel said softly, breaking the tension. I move to enter the contents of that bag into evidence. Judge Whitmore nodded grimly. Proceed. Damien Cole untied the velvet strings. He tipped the bag over an evidence tray provided by the clerk. A cascade of glittering lights spilled into the sterile courtroom. Diamond tennis bracelets, a pair of flawless emerald earrings, a heavy gold Rolex, and a vintage Cartier brooch. It was the entirety of Lillian's stolen jewelry, minus the one piece currently resting against the throat of the sobbing woman in the front row. Lillian let out a shuddering breath. Seeing her grandmother's brooch, safe and tangible, broke through her icy exterior. A single tear tracked down her cheek. Judge Whitmore stared at the fortune glittering on the clerk's desk. He took off his reading glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. When he looked up, his eyes were devoid of any judicial patience. He looked directly at Gregory Hale. Mr. Hale, the judge began, his voice dangerously calm. In the last half hour, your client has demonstrably committed perjury on my stand. He has been implicated in a $250,000 insurance fraud scheme, felony grand larceny, and the concealment of marital assets via a shell corporation. Do you have anything to say before I hold him in contempt? Hale looked at Dominic, then at the diamonds, and finally at the judge. The slick lawyer swallowed hard, visibly distancing himself from his client. Your Honor, the defense requests a brief recess to confer. Denied! Judge Whitmore fired back instantly. There is no conferring. This divorce hearing is indefinitely suspended. I am entering an immediate order freezing all of Mr. Ashcroft's accounts, both domestic and foreign. Furthermore, I am forwarding the transcripts of today's proceedings, along with Mr. Cole's evidence, directly to the Cook County District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution. Dominic let out a strangled, pathetic groan and put his head down on the table. As for the stolen property, Judge Whitmore continued, his gaze shifting to the gallery, he zeroed in on Vivian Shaw, who was shaking uncontrollably, her mascara running down her face in dark, muddy rivers. Ms. Shaw, stand up. Vivian slowly rose, her legs trembling so violently she had to grip the wooden bench to stay upright. You are wearing a piece of evidence, the judge stated. And furthermore, you are wearing property that rightfully belongs to the plaintiff. Take it off. Vivian choked on a sob. I can't. The clasp... Take the damn necklace off, Ms. Shaw, or I will have the bailiff arrest you for possession of stolen goods right this second. Judge Whitmore bellowed, his patience entirely exhausted. Trembling fingers reached up to the back of her neck. Vivian struggled with the intricate platinum clasp. The room watched in utter silence as the young woman who had strutted into the courtroom like royalty fumbled awkwardly, humiliated and exposed. With a quiet click, the clasp gave way. The heavy Ceylon sapphire slipped from her neck, pooling into her shaking hands. Bailiff, secure the item, the judge ordered. The officer walked over to the gallery fence, holding out a clear plastic evidence bag. Vivian dropped the necklace into it. It landed with a soft thud. Ms. Crow, Judge Whitmore addressed Lillian's lawyer. The court will retain custody of these items for a short period to photograph and document them for the district attorney. After that, they will be released back into the custody of your client. As for the divorce settlement, I suggest Mr. Hale advises his client to give you absolutely everything you ask for, lest I make it my personal mission to see him bankrupted before he goes to federal prison. Understood, Your Honor. Thank you, Isabel replied, a terrifyingly serene smile on her face. We are adjourned, the judge said, striking his gavel one final time before sweeping out of the courtroom. Chaos immediately erupted. Reporters who had sneaked into the back rows scrambled for the doors. Gregory Hale leaned over and began furiously whispering into Dominic's ear while Dominic just stared blankly at the wood grain of the table. Vivian Shaw did not wait. She grabbed her designer purse and bolted for the aisle, desperate to escape the stares. As she ran past the plaintiff's table, she made the mistake of making eye contact with Lillian. Lillian did not sneer. She did not yell. She simply looked at the younger woman with a gaze of profound, chilling pity. Vivian broke the gaze, practically sprinting through the double doors, a disgraced shadow of the woman who had entered earlier. Damian Cole stepped down from the stand, packing up his manila folder. He walked over to Isabel and Lillian. Excellent work, Mr. Cole, Isabel said, shaking his hand. Just doing my job, counselor, Damian said, nodding politely to Lillian. I am glad we could get your family's legacy back, Mrs. Ashcroft. Thank you, Lillian whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Isabel placed a gentle hand on Lillian's shoulder. Come on. Let us go draft a settlement that leaves him with nothing but his custom suits. Lillian stood up. She smoothed the skirt of her dress, picked up her leather notebook, and walked down the center aisle of the courtroom. She did not look back at Dominic. She did not need to. The man she had loved was gone, replaced by a pathetic criminal who had just destroyed his own life. She pushed through the heavy wooden doors and stepped out into the bright, bustling hallway of the courthouse. The air felt lighter. The oppressive weight that had been crushing her chest for months was gone. She had walked into room 400 as a betrayed wife, but she was walking out as a woman who had reclaimed her history, her dignity, and her future. And as for her great-grandmother's sapphire, it was going to look spectacular at the victory gala. If you loved watching this arrogant husband and his entitled mistress get exactly what they deserved in court, hit that like button right now. Do not forget to share this insane real-life drama with your friends who love a good karma story. And subscribe to the channel for more unbelievable courtroom takedowns and shocking legal twists.